The sky bled crimson as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the flight deck in hues of fire. Lieutenant Maya Winters stood motionless, her flight suit still damp with sweat from the 6-hour combat mission she'd just completed. Her F-18 Super Hornet sat behind her, its engines cooling with metallic pings that punctuated the otherwise hushed deck. 12 confirmed targets neutralized. 0 civilian casualties. Mission objectives complete. But all Maya could think about was the captain's words that morning. "I need a real combat pilot for this mission, not some quota filler with a pretty smile." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The USS Lincoln cut through the Persian Gulf's waters with purpose, its massive bulk barely registering the waves beneath. Inside the carrier's bridge, Captain Richard Donovan studied the mission reports with a scowl etched across his weathered face. 27 years in the Navy had carved permanent lines around his eyes, and the last 3 months commanding the carrier strike group had only deepened them. The tension in the region was escalating, and intelligence had identified a network of insurgent bases hidden throughout the mountains of the coastline. "We need our best pilots on this," Donovan announced to his senior officers gathered around the tactical display. "These mountain missions require precision flying through narrow valleys. One mistake and we lose both pilot and aircraft." His eyes swept across the assembled team, deliberately skipping over Commander Sarah Chun, his air wing commander. "I'll assign Lieutenant Commander Jackson as mission lead," he continued. "He's got the most combat hours in mountain terrain." Commander Chun cleared her throat. "With respect, Captain, Lieutenant Winters has more confirmed strikes in mountainous conditions than anyone else in the wing. Her simulator scores are the highest we've ever recorded." The captain's expression hardened. "Lieutenant Winters has been with us for what, 4 months? I need experienced combat pilots, not academy hotshots who've barely seen real action." "Sir, Winters has completed 3 combat tours before joining us. Her record speaks for itself." Donovan's laugh held no humor. "Records can be polished, Commander. We all know how the brass loves their diversity statistics." The implication hung in the air like smoke. "I want Jackson leading the mission." End of discussion. Chun's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. The briefing continued, with Captain Donovan outlining the mission parameters. A series of precision strikes against insurgent weapons caches nestled within a mountain range, notorious for unpredictable wind patterns and limited visibility. 2 decks below, Lieutenant Maya Winters was running combat simulations in the carrier's tactical training room. Her fingers moved with practiced precision across the controls, her eyes never leaving the screen as she navigated a virtual F-18 through a narrow canyon while avoiding simulated anti-aircraft fire. "Still at it, Winters?" Lieutenant Commander Jackson appeared beside her, watching as she completed the run with a perfect score. "Just staying sharp, sir," Maya replied, her focus unwavering as she reset the simulation for another run. "Word is the captain's planning a major strike mission for tomorrow. Mountain terrain." Jackson leaned against the console. "Probably going to tap me to lead it." Maya nodded, her expression neutral despite the disappointment that flared in her chest. She'd been hoping for a chance to prove herself since joining the Lincoln. "You've got the experience, sir." Jackson studied her for a moment. "You know, for what it's worth, your scores are better than mine in these scenarios." "Simulations aren't real combat," Maya replied, echoing the refrain she'd heard countless times. "Maybe not, but talent is talent." Jackson straightened. "Don't let Donovan get to you. The old man's from a different era." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "Is it that obvious? That you want to fly this mission? Only to everyone with eyes." Jackson chuckled. "For what it's worth, I put your name forward to Commander Chun. We'll see what happens." After Jackson left, Maya ran the simulation 3 more times, each with perfect scores. The mountain terrain in the program was remarkably similar to the actual region where tomorrow's mission would take place, not a coincidence, she was sure. Maya had joined the Navy against her family's wishes. Her father, a professor of literature at Princeton, had envisioned his daughter following his academic path. Her mother, a civil rights attorney, had hoped Maya would pursue law. Neither understood when their 17-year-old daughter announced she wanted to fly fighter jets. "It's so primitive," her father had said, confusion evident in his voice. "You have such a brilliant mind." "The military-industrial complex isn't something to aspire to," her mother had added. "You could do so much more important work." But Maya had been certain. She'd known since the first time she'd seen fighter jets perform at an air show when she was 10. The precision, the power, the skill required. It had awakened something in her that nothing else ever had. She'd graduated from the Naval Academy with honors, completed flight school at the top of her class, and earned her wings with a determination that surprised even her instructors. And yet, here she was, 8 years later, still fighting to be seen as a pilot first, a woman second. Maya finished her simulation runs and headed to the mess hall. It was nearly empty at this late hour, just a few night shift crew grabbing coffee. She selected a protein bar and a bottle of water, calculating the nutrients she needed to remain at peak performance tomorrow, regardless of whether she'd be flying the mission or watching from the sidelines. "Lieutenant Winters." Commander Chun's voice came from behind her. Maya turned, immediately straightening her posture. "Commander." "At ease, walk with me." Chun led them out of the mess hall and down a quiet corridor. "I've been reviewing your simulation scores." "Yes, ma'am." "They're impressive. Consistent, too. That's rarer than you might think." Maya said nothing, waiting for Chun to continue. "The captain has assigned Lieutenant Commander Jackson to lead tomorrow's mission," Chun said, confirming what Maya had already suspected. "I understand, ma'am." Chun stopped walking, turning to face Maya directly. "Do you? Because I'm not sure I do. Jackson is a fine pilot, but your scores in mountain terrain scenarios are superior. Your actual combat record is exemplary. By any objective measure, you should be leading this mission. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Maya hesitated, careful with her words. "The captain has concerns about my experience level with this carrier group." "The captain has concerns that have nothing to do with your abilities as a pilot," Chun corrected, her voice low but intense. "I want you to know that I've formally registered my recommendation that you lead this mission. I've included your simulation scores and combat records in my filing." Maya blinked in surprise. Commander Chun was going on record opposing the captain's decision, a move that could have consequences for her own career. "Thank you, ma'am, but I don't want to create problems." "The problem already exists, Lieutenant." Chun's expression was resolute. "Sometimes the only way to solve a problem is to face it directly. Get some rest. You're assigned as Jackson's wingman for tomorrow. Be ready to brief at 0500. Maya returned to her quarters, her mind racing. Being assigned as wingman was better than being left out of the mission entirely, but she couldn't help feeling the sting of the captain's dismissal. Her roommate, Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez, was already asleep, so Maya changed quietly and climbed into her bunk. Sleep eluded her. Instead, Maya's thoughts drifted to her first combat mission, 3 years earlier. She'd been fresh out of training, assigned to a carrier in the South China Sea during a period of heightened tensions. What had begun as a routine patrol had quickly escalated when they'd encountered hostile aircraft behaving aggressively toward a commercial airliner. Maya had been the junior pilot in a 4-aircraft formation. When communications failed and the situation deteriorated, it had been Maya who'd maneuvered her jet between the airliner and the approaching hostiles, holding her position despite increasingly dangerous provocations. Her actions had given the civilians time to clear the area while avoiding an international incident. Her commanding officer back then, a gruff commander with 30 years of service, had called her to his office afterward. "That was either the bravest or stupidest flying I've ever seen, Winters," he'd said, his face unreadable. "Just doing my job, sir," she'd replied, prepared for a reprimand. Instead, he'd surprised her. "No, your job was to follow formation and await orders. What you did was use your judgment in a complex situation, with seconds to make decisions that could have started a war." He'd paused then, studying her. "That's not something they teach at the academy. That's instinct. Don't lose it." That commander had become her mentor, pushing her to take on increasingly challenging missions, never once treating her differently because she was one of only a handful of women in their squadron. When he'd been killed 2 years later during a night landing gone wrong, Maya had lost more than a mentor. She'd lost the one senior officer who'd always judged her solely on her abilities. The memory still ached. Maya checked her watch. 02:00 hours. She needed sleep if she was going to be sharp for tomorrow's mission. Closing her eyes, she began the breathing exercises she'd developed to calm her mind before combat flights. Slow, deliberate breaths. Visualization of the mission parameters. Mental rehearsal of emergency procedures. Sleep finally came, but it felt like minutes later when her alarm sounded at 0430. Maya was instantly alert, a skill honed through years of pre-dawn missions. She dressed efficiently, double-checking her flight suit and gear with practiced movements. Rodriguez stirred in the other bunk. "Big day?" she mumbled, still half asleep. "Mountain strike mission," Maya confirmed, tying back her dark hair. "With Captain Dinosaur running the show. Good luck with that." Maya allowed herself a small smile at the nickname some of the younger officers had given Captain Donovan. "Jackson's leading. I'm flying as his wingman." Rodriguez sat up, suddenly more awake. "Seriously? Everyone knows you're the best mountain flyer we've got." "Everyone except the captain," Maya replied, checking her watch. "I've got to go. Mission brief in 15. The briefing room was already filled when Maya arrived. She took a seat near the back, nodding to Jackson, who was at the front reviewing mission details with Commander Chun. Captain Donovan entered moments later, and the room snapped to attention. "As you were," he said, moving to the tactical display. "Today's operation targets 5 weapons caches providing support to insurgent groups throughout this region." He indicated a mountainous area on the display. "Intelligence confirms these locations are being used to store and distribute advanced weapons systems that have been used against coalition forces." The captain continued, outlining the mission parameters, expected resistance, and extraction protocols. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson will lead Alpha Flight for the primary targets. Lieutenant Winters will fly as his wingman. Bravo Flight will provide secondary target coverage and support." As the briefing continued, Maya studied the terrain maps with intense focus. The mountain passes were narrow, with multiple potential locations for anti-aircraft emplacements. Weather forecasts predicted clear skies, but strong wind shears between the peaks. Exactly the conditions she'd been practicing for in simulations. "Questions?" Captain Donovan concluded. A lieutenant from Bravo Flight raised his hand. "Sir, intelligence suggests these sites may have portable surface-to-air missile capabilities. What's our countermeasure protocol?" "Standard evasive maneuvers," Jackson replied. "The narrow terrain limits their tracking capabilities if we maintain proper speed and approach angles." Maya spoke up. "Sir, with respect, the simulation data suggests that, in these specific valleys, the standard evasion pattern actually increases vulnerability due to the wind shear patterns between the peaks." The room fell silent. Captain Donovan's gaze locked onto Maya, his expression darkening. "And what would you suggest instead, Lieutenant?" A modified approach that uses the terrain's natural radar shadows, sir. I've run it successfully in simulations. It reduces exposure time by approximately 40% while maintaining target acquisition capability. Commander Chun interjected. I've reviewed Lieutenant Winter's simulation data. Her approach has merit. The captain's jaw tightened visibly, but before he could respond, Jackson spoke up. I'd like to see that data, Winters. If it improves our survival odds, I'm all for it. Captain Donovan clearly wasn't pleased, but he nodded curtly. Review the approach after the briefing. Final call remains with Lieutenant Commander Jackson as mission leader. After the briefing concluded, Maya quickly pulled up her simulation data for Jackson and the other pilots. She walked them through her modified approach, explaining the key differences from standard protocol. The crucial factor is timing, she explained, pointing to a narrow passage between two peaks. If you hit this point at exactly the right speed and angle, the wind shear actually works in your favor, pushing you into this natural blind spot while you acquire your target. Jackson studied the data, nodding slowly. It's aggressive. Requires precise control to avoid being slammed into the mountainside if the wind shifts. That's why I've run it over 50 times in simulation, Maya replied. Different wind conditions, visibility factors, even aircraft damage scenarios. The approach is adaptable. Jackson looked at her with newfound respect. This is solid work, Winters. We'll integrate it into the mission plan. 2 hours later, Maya was strapped into her FA-18, running through her pre-flight checks with methodical precision. Through her canopy, she could see Jackson in his aircraft ahead of hers, giving her a thumbs up as his own systems came online. Alpha 2, this is Alpha 1. Jackson's voice came through her headset. Systems check. Alpha 1, Alpha 2, all systems green, Maya responded, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline as her jet's engines roared to life. The launch sequence proceeded smoothly, and soon Maya was airborne, forming up with Jackson as they headed toward the target area. The carrier fell away behind them, becoming a tiny speck on the vast ocean surface before disappearing completely. Alpha Flight, this is home plate. Commander Chen's voice came through the comm. Weather conditions at target location remain as briefed. Wind at 22 knots, gusting to 35 in the mountain passes. Copy that, home plate, Jackson responded. ETA to target area, 18 minutes. As they approached the coastline, Maya focused on the mission ahead. The target areas were spread across a 30-mile section of mountainous terrain, each weapons cache nestled within valleys that provided natural protection from aerial observation. Their approach needed to be precise, too high, and ground-based radar would detect them early. Too low, and they'd risk collision with the terrain. Alpha 2, maintain formation through the initial approach, Jackson instructed. We'll split for individual target runs once we clear the coastal ridge. Copy, Alpha 1. The mountains rose before them, jagged peaks piercing the cloud layer. Maya adjusted her heading, feeling the aircraft respond to her touch like an extension of her own body. This was where she felt most alive in the cockpit, making split-second decisions where the margin for error was measured in fractions of seconds. They cleared the coastal ridge, and the valley network opened up before them. The first warning came almost immediately. Alpha Flight, we have radar lock, the electronic warfare officer back on the carrier reported. Surface-to-air systems activating at multiple locations. Commencing evasive approach, Jackson announced, beginning the modified pattern Maya had developed. Maya followed, her aircraft dancing through the valley at near supersonic speed, using the terrain to break radar lock while maintaining course toward her assigned targets. The jet bucked beneath her as she hit the predicted wind shear, but she was ready for it, adjusting her control surfaces to ride the turbulence rather than fight it. Alpha 1, missile launch detected, the warning came through her headset. 2 o'clock high. Maya watched as Jackson executed a perfect evasive maneuver, dropping altitude and banking hard to put a mountain ridge between his aircraft and the approaching missile. The SAM detonated harmlessly against the rock face, sending debris scattering through the valley. "Good dodge, Alpha 1, Maya commended, scanning her own threat indicators. "Your approach pattern works, Alpha 2, Jackson replied. Continuing to primary target. They proceeded deeper into the mountain range, evading 2 more missile launches before reaching their first target area. Jackson lined up his approach, released his ordnance with precision, and pulled up sharply as the weapon's cache erupted in flames below. "Alpha 1, good hit, continuing to secondary target," he reported. Maya was next, lining up her approach to the second cache. She felt in perfect harmony with her aircraft, anticipating each gust and turbulence pocket before it hit. Her targeting system locked, and she released her payload, watching as it struck the target with pinpoint accuracy. "Alpha 2, confirmed direct hit," she reported, already banking toward her next objective. What should have been a routine, if dangerous, mission suddenly became something else entirely when a new threat appeared on their scopes. "Alpha Flight, be advised," the carrier's tactical officer warned. "We have new contacts approaching from the north. Fighter aircraft moving fast." "Hostile air assets weren't in the briefing," Jackson responded, tension evident in his voice. "Intelligence update suggests these are advanced fighters providing protection for a high-value target in the region," came the reply. "Captain orders mission abort. Return to carrier immediately." Maya checked her tactical display. The approaching fighters were closing fast, too fast for a safe retreat along their planned extraction route. "Alpha 1, those fighters will intercept us before we clear the mountain range if we take the planned extraction route," she warned. Jackson's response was immediate. "Alpha 2, what do you suggest?" Maya made a split-second decision. "We need to use the canyon network to the west. It's narrower but provides better cover from air interception." That route wasn't in the mission plan, Jackson noted, but he was already adjusting his heading. "Lead the way, Alpha 2, taking your wing." The role reversal happened so naturally that Maya barely registered it. One moment she was the wingman, the next she was leading the formation through a series of canyons so narrow that their wingtips seemed to brush the rock walls. The hostile fighters followed, but their pilots were clearly less comfortable with the terrain, maintaining altitude above the mountains rather than risking the canyons. "They're setting up to intercept us at the coastal exit," Maya observed. "We need a diversion." "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked. "Split formation. I'll take the low route through Dragon's Throat. You take the higher pass to the south. They'll have to divide their forces or choose one of us to pursue." Dragon's Throat was the narrowest canyon in the range, barely wide enough for an FA-18 to pass through. It was considered unnavigable at combat speeds, too dangerous even for training exercises. "Negative, Alpha 2, came Captain Donovan's voice suddenly over the comm. "That route is too risky. Both aircraft maintain course for southern extraction." Maya hesitated for only a second. "With respect, Captain, the southern route leaves us exposed to interception by superior numbers. Splitting their forces gives us better odds." "That wasn't a suggestion, Lieutenant. It was an order," the captain barked. Commander Chun's voice cut in. "Alpha Flight, tactical assessment supports Lieutenant Winter's strategy. Captain, requesting authorization for split extraction." A tense silence followed. Maya could almost feel the conflict occurring on the carrier's bridge. Finally, the captain's voice returned. "Authorization granted for split extraction. Alpha 1, take southern route. Alpha 2, proceed with caution through the northern canyon." "Copy that," Maya responded, already adjusting her course toward the infamous Dragon's Throat. "Alpha 1, I'll see you back at the carrier." "Be careful in there, Alpha 2, Jackson warned. "Those walls get mighty close." "Just worry about your own six," Maya replied with forced lightness. "I'll be fine." As Jackson's aircraft banked away to the south, Maya took a deep breath and focused entirely on the challenge ahead. Dragon's Throat was aptly named, a winding canyon with sheer rock walls that narrowed to less than 100 feet at its tightest point. At over 800 miles per hour, she would have fractions of a second to make course corrections. "Alpha 2, be advised," the tactical officer reported. "2 hostile aircraft have altered course to pursue you. 3 continuing on intercept course with Alpha 1. The odds were still better than facing all 5 together, but Maya knew she was flying into an extremely dangerous situation. The canyon entrance loomed ahead, a dark gash in the mountainside that seemed barely large enough for her aircraft. "Alpha 2, entering Dragon's Throat," she reported calmly, throttling back slightly to give herself more reaction time. The canyon walls closed around her like a vice, the navigation system frantically warning of terrain proximity on both sides. Maya ignored the warnings, flying by sight and instinct, making minute adjustments to her flight path as the canyon twisted and turned. The hostile fighters remained above, unwilling to follow her into the narrow passage. "They're setting up to intercept at the exit," the tactical officer warned. Maya processed this information while maintaining her focus on navigating the canyon. "Request Bravo flight position." "Bravo flight is 8 minutes from your position, moving to support. Too far to help with the immediate threat." Maya would be on her own when she emerged from the canyon, facing 2 advanced enemy fighters with an aircraft that would be low on both fuel and ammunition after the primary mission. The canyon narrowed further, forcing Maya to roll her aircraft almost sideways to squeeze through a particularly tight section. The airframe shuddered around her as wind shear buffeted the jet, threatening to slam her into the rock walls. "Alpha 2, status?" Commander Chun's voice carried controlled concern. "Still threading the needle," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. 30 seconds to canyon exit." She could see daylight ahead where the canyon opened onto the coastal plain. The tactical display showed the 2 hostile aircraft circling the exit point, waiting for her. "Alpha 2, hostile aircraft are in optimal firing position at canyon exit," the tactical officer reported. "Recommend extreme evasive maneuvers upon exit." Maya made a different calculation. The enemy pilots would be expecting her to emerge from the canyon and immediately execute evasive maneuvers, braking left or right to avoid their missile lock. They'd have their weapon systems primed for that exact moment. "Alpha 2, what's your extraction plan?" Commander Chun asked. "Something they won't expect," Maya replied cryptically. As the canyon exit approached, Maya did the opposite of standard protocol. Instead of reducing speed for better maneuverability, she pushed her throttle forward, accelerating to maximum afterburner. Rather than preparing to brake left or right, she adjusted her aircraft's angle to exit the canyon in a near-vertical climb. The moment her aircraft burst from the canyon, Maya pulled back hard on the stick, sending her FA-18 rocketing skyward in a move that momentarily confused the enemy targeting systems. The sudden vertical acceleration was crushing, pushing her body to the limits of what the flight suit's pressure systems could compensate for. Dark edges crept into her vision as the G-forces mounted, but she maintained consciousness through the practiced breathing techniques all fighter pilots learned. The maneuver worked exactly as she'd hoped. The enemy aircraft had been positioned for a horizontal interception, their weapon systems tracking along the expected flight path. Maya's vertical climb took her through their targeting envelope before they could adjust, putting her briefly above both hostile aircraft. "Fox 3, she called out, releasing her remaining air-to-air missile at the nearest enemy fighter. The missile struck home, sending the aircraft spiraling toward the ocean in a trail of black smoke. The second fighter pilot reacted quickly, braking hard to avoid giving Maya a clean shot with her cannon. A dangerous aerial dance began. 2 advanced aircraft, evenly matched in capabilities, each piloted by someone willing to push their machine to its absolute limits. Alpha 2, Bravo flight ETA 4 minutes, came the update from the carrier. I might not have 4 minutes, Maya replied grimly, executing a high G-turn to avoid a missile from the remaining enemy aircraft. The missile detonated close enough to rock her jet with its shockwave. Warning lights flashed across her console, minor damage to her right wing. Fuel levels approaching critical as the afterburners consumed her reserves at an alarming rate. The enemy pilot was good, very good, anticipating her maneuvers and countering effectively. Maya realized she needed to end this quickly. The longer the engagement lasted, the more her fuel and damage issues would become decisive factors. She made a calculated gamble, executing a maneuver that appeared to leave her vulnerable to attack from below. The enemy pilot took the bait, climbing rapidly to position himself for a killing shot. At the last possible moment, Maya cut her throttle and deployed her air brakes simultaneously, executing a maneuver known as the Cobra, a rapid deceleration that caused her pursuer to overshoot her position. As the enemy aircraft passed above her, Maya throttled back up and lined up the perfect shot with her cannon. "Guns, guns, guns," she called out as she squeezed the trigger, sending a stream of 20mm rounds into the enemy fighter's engines. The aircraft erupted in flames, the pilot ejecting seconds before it exploded. "Alpha 2, splash 2 bandits," Maya reported, her voice betraying none of the exhaustion that was beginning to set in after the intense combat. "Proceeding to extraction course." "Copy that, Alpha 2, Commander Chun replied, and Maya could hear the pride in her voice. "Spectacular flying, Lieutenant. Return to base." By the time Maya's FA-18 touched down on the carrier deck, her fuel gauge was showing near empty. The perfect 3-wire landing, catching the third arresting cable with her tailhook, was almost anticlimactic after the mission she'd just completed. As she powered down her aircraft, Maya became aware of something unusual. The flight deck crew, normally focused entirely on their dangerous jobs, were pausing to look at her aircraft. Some were giving her thumbs-up signs. Her canopy raised, and she removed her helmet, suddenly realizing how exhausted she felt. Commander Chun was waiting as Maya climbed down from her jet. Behind her stood Captain Donovan, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Winters," the captain said as she approached and saluted. "That was—" Maya waited, expecting criticism about her decision to disregard his initial orders or take unnecessary risks. "Some of the finest flying I've seen in 27 years of naval aviation," he finished, surprising her completely. "Thank you, sir," Maya replied, unsure how else to respond. "The tactical recordings of your navigation through Dragon's Throat and subsequent engagement will be studied at the Academy," Commander Chun added. 2 confirmed air-to-air kills against superior numbers while flying damaged and low on fuel. That's textbook perfection. Captain Donovan cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Winters, I owe you an apology. My judgment was compromised by outdated thinking. Your actions today saved not only yourself and Lieutenant Commander Jackson, but potentially this entire carrier group. The intelligence we've received indicates those enemy aircraft were merely the advance force for a much larger planned operation against our position." Maya stood at attention, processing his words. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," he replied, echoing the words of her first commander from years ago. "Your job was to follow orders and complete the assigned mission. What you did was exercise superior judgment under extreme pressure with minimal time for decisions. That's not something we can teach." Commander Chun smiled. "What the captain is trying to say, Lieutenant, is that he's recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and effective immediately, you'll be leading your own flight group." The captain extended his hand. "The next mission briefing is at 0800 tomorrow. I'll expect your input on the tactical approach, Lieutenant Winters." As she shook his hand, Maya realized something had fundamentally changed. not just in how the captain saw her, but in how she saw herself. She'd never needed his validation to know her own worth as a pilot, but having earned his respect meant that other women who came after her might face one less barrier. "I'll be ready, sir," she said simply. As the captain walked away, Commander Chun leaned closer. "By the way, the recording of your canyon run has already gone viral among the fleet. They're calling you the Ghost now." Maya smiled tiredly. "I'd prefer a shower and about 12 hours of sleep to a nickname." Chun laughed. "Get some rest, Ghost. Tomorrow's briefing comes early." Maya's quarters were silent except for the soft hum of the carrier's ventilation system. She sat on the edge of her bunk, the adrenaline of combat finally fading from her system, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made even removing her flight suit seem like an insurmountable task. Her roommate Rodriguez was on duty, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. A knock at the door pulled her from her daze. "Enter," she called, straightening her posture automatically. Lieutenant Commander Jackson stepped inside, his own fatigue evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "Thought you might want this," he said, holding out a steaming mug of coffee. Maya accepted it gratefully. "Thanks. How'd your extraction go?" "Not nearly as exciting as yours," Jackson replied, leaning against the bulkhead. "3 bogeys on my tail, but Bravo flight intercepted before things got interesting." He studied her for a moment. "Word is you took out 2 advanced fighters while flying through a canyon that most pilots wouldn't attempt in perfect conditions." Maya sipped her coffee. It seemed like the best option at the time. "That's putting it mildly." Jackson shook his head in admiration. "The flight deck crew is calling you the Ghost now. Said you appeared out of nowhere like an apparition and disappeared just as fast." "So I've heard," Maya replied, a small smile finally breaking through her exhaustion. "Not the worst calcine I could have ended up with." Jackson's expression grew more serious. "Donovan's recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross. Commander Chun mentioned that. Seems excessive for just doing my job." "It's not excessive, and you know it," Jackson countered. The captain's changed his tune completely. "You should have heard him in the debriefing after you landed." Exemplary airmanship and tactical brilliance were thrown around quite a bit. Maya looked down at her coffee. "One successful mission doesn't change the structural issues." "No," Jackson agreed, "but it's a start. Sometimes that's all you get in this man's Navy, a start." He pushed himself away from the bulkhead. "Get some rest, Ghost. You've earned it. Tomorrow's briefing will be here before you know it." After Jackson left, Maya finally found the energy to shower and change. As the hot water washed away the sweat and tension of the day, her thoughts drifted to her parents. What would they think if they could see her now? Her father, who had once lamented her wasted intellect, and her mother, who had feared her daughter was becoming part of a system she had spent her career fighting against. Maya had stopped trying to justify her choices to them years ago. The disappointment in their voices during their monthly calls had slowly transformed into a reluctant acceptance, though never true understanding. They loved her, she knew, but they couldn't comprehend what drove her to put her life on the line in a cockpit. How could she explain to them that she had never felt more alive, more present, more herself than she did when pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the air? That the moments of perfect harmony between human and machine, between instinct and training, between fear and control, gave her a clarity that nothing else in life had ever matched? After her shower, Maya crawled into her bunk and was asleep almost instantly, her body demanding recovery after the physical and mental strain of combat flying. Her dreams were filled with narrow canyons and enemy fighters, her sleeping mind still processing the day's events. The alarm seemed to sound mere minutes after she'd closed her eyes, though her watch showed she'd slept for nearly 6 hours. Maya rose quickly, dressing in her uniform and heading to the officers' mess for breakfast before the 0800 briefing. The mess hall felt strangely quiet as she entered, heads turning in her direction. Maya maintained her composure, selecting her breakfast and finding an empty seat as conversation slowly resumed around her. She was halfway through her meal when Rodriguez dropped into the seat across from her. "So," Rodriguez said without preamble, "the ghost walks among us mere mortals." Maya rolled her eyes. "Not you too. Are you kidding? The whole carrier's talking about your canyon run. They're saying you flew sideways through sections that weren't wide enough for your wingspan." "That's physically impossible," Maya pointed out, though she'd come close enough that the exaggeration wasn't entirely unwarranted. "Details," Rodriguez waved dismissively. "The point is, you've become a legend overnight. Even Captain Donovan is singing your praises, and that man hasn't had a kind word for anyone under 40 in the 3 years I've served with him." Maya finished her coffee, uncomfortable with the attention. "It was just one mission." "It was the mission, Winters," Rodriguez replied, suddenly serious. "The one that proves what some of us have been saying all along, that a pilot's worth is measured by skill, not gender, not background, not anything except what happens in the cockpit." Before Maya could respond, the ship's PA system crackled to life. "Lieutenant Winters, report to the bridge." "Lieutenant Winters to the bridge." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "The captain's inner sanctum? Now that's interesting." Maya stood, gathering her tray. "Probably wants to brief me before the main mission planning session. Or maybe he's going to apologize for being a dinosaur," Rodriguez suggested with a grin. "Let me know if he gets down on one knee." The carrier's bridge was the nerve center of the entire vessel, a space typically reserved for senior officers and essential personnel. Maya had been there only once before, during her initial tour after joining the Lincoln's air wing. She reported to the officer of the deck, who directed her to the captain's ready room adjacent to the main bridge. Captain Donovan was standing at a tactical display when she entered, studying satellite imagery that Maya recognized as the mountain region from yesterday's mission. Commander Chun stood nearby, along with several intelligence officers Maya didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Winters, reporting as ordered, sir," Maya said, standing at attention. "At ease, Lieutenant," Donovan replied, gesturing her forward. "Take a look at this." Maya approached the display, noting that it showed real-time satellite imagery rather than the archived images they'd used for mission planning the previous day. "Our mission yesterday was more significant than we initially realized," Donovan explained. "The weapons caches we destroyed were part of a larger network preparing for a coordinated attack against our forces in the region. The hostile aircraft you encountered were providing advance reconnaissance for what intelligence now believes was going to be a major offensive." Maya studied the imagery, noting the increased activity around several mountain bases that hadn't been part of their target package. "They're repositioning," she observed. "Exactly," Commander Chun confirmed. "Your actions yesterday disrupted their timetable and forced them to adjust their strategy. We have a narrow window to capitalize on that disruption." Captain Donovan manipulated the display, zooming in on a particular mountain valley deeper in the range than their previous targets. "Intelligence has identified this location as their primary command center. Taking it out would severely degrade their ability to coordinate any offensive operations. With respect, sir, that location is well beyond the effective combat radius of our aircraft if we maintain standard mission parameters," Maya noted, calculating fuel requirements and combat loiter time in her head. "Standard mission parameters aren't going to work for this target," Donovan agreed. "That's why I've called you here. After yesterday's demonstration of your unconventional approach to tactical problems, I want your input on how to reach this target." Maya was momentarily taken aback by the captain's request. 24 hours ago, he'd been dismissing her capabilities and questioning her combat readiness. Now he was seeking her tactical input ahead of senior officers with decades more experience. "Sir, may I?" she asked, gesturing to the display controls. Donovan stepped aside, allowing her access to the tactical system. Maya manipulated the terrain mapping, studying the approach vectors and defensive positions around the target. The conventional approach would be from the south. Using this valley system, she began, tracing the route on the display. But satellite imagery shows they've heavily reinforced air defenses along that corridor, likely anticipating that exact approach. Correct, Chun confirmed. Aerial reconnaissance shows multiple SAM sites and anti-aircraft artillery positions covering the southern approach. Maya continued analyzing the terrain, looking for alternatives. The eastern approach is too exposed, 50 miles of open terrain before reaching the mountains. They'd see us coming well in advance. What about from the north? Donovan asked. Maya shook her head. The northern approach requires crossing this mountain ridge, which places aircraft at 20,000 feet minimum altitude, well within their radar envelope. We'd be detected long before reaching the target. She fell silent, studying the western approach, a complex network of narrow canyons and high ridges that created a natural maze leading to the target area. It was exactly the kind of terrain that conventional tactical wisdom declared unsuitable for combat operations. You're thinking about the western approach, Chun observed, noting where Maya's attention had focused. It's suicidal, one of the intelligence officers interjected. That canyon system is worse than Dragon's Throat, multiple narrow passages, extreme wind shear conditions, and natural radar blind spots that work both ways. We couldn't maintain communication with our aircraft through most of that route. Maya looked up from the display. That's exactly why it would work. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. The western approach is so challenging that they've allocated minimal defensive resources to cover it, Maya explained. They're assuming no pilot would attempt it. Their radar coverage has gaps because the terrain makes consistent coverage impossible. And they've compensated by positioning visual observation posts at key junctions. She pointed to several small structures visible in the satellite imagery. These observation posts are their weak point. A small force, 2 aircraft maximum, could navigate the canyon system below radar coverage and eliminate these observation posts without alerting the main base. Once the western approach is secure, a larger strike package could follow the same route to hit the command center. Captain Donovan studied the proposed route, his expression thoughtful. You're suggesting a 2-phase operation. A Pathfinder mission to clear the western approach, followed by the main strike force. Yes, sir, Maya confirmed. The Pathfinder mission would be high risk, requiring pilots comfortable with extreme terrain navigation and precision strikes against small targets while maintaining communications blackout protocols. And I assume you're volunteering for this Pathfinder mission, Lieutenant? Donovan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I believe I've demonstrated the necessary skills, sir, Maya replied evenly. Donovan exchanged a glance with Commander Chun before turning back to Maya. Draw up a detailed mission plan for this western approach. I want contingencies for every possible failure point, communications protocols for operating in the radar shadow, and specific pilot requirements for both the Pathfinder and main strike elements. Yes, sir, Maya acknowledged. And Lieutenant, Donovan added as she prepared to leave, select your wingmen carefully for the Pathfinder mission. You'll need someone who can keep up with you in those canyons. Maya spent the next 3 hours in the tactical planning room, developing the mission parameters for what was quickly being designated Operation Ghostwalker. The name had apparently been Chun's idea, a nod to Maya's new callsign and the nature of the mission, which would require the Pathfinder aircraft to move like specters through the enemy's defenses. Lieutenant Commander Jackson found her there, surrounded by terrain maps and tactical simulations. Heard you're planning something crazy, he said by way of greeting. Maya looked up from her work. That's one way to put it. Jackson studied the route she'd mapped through the Western Canyon system. This is beyond crazy. This is... He paused, searching for the right word. This is inspired. It's the only viable approach that gives us the element of surprise, Maya explained. And Donovan signed off on this? Jackson asked incredulously. Not only signed off on it, he requested it, Maya replied. Apparently saving his carrier group from a surprise attack has improved his opinion of my tactical judgment. Jackson nodded, continuing to study the route. Who's flying as your wingman? This isn't something you can do solo. Maya had been considering that question since leaving the bridge. The Pathfinder mission would require a specific set of skills: exceptional terrain navigation, precision weapons delivery under extreme pressure, and the ability to maintain perfect formation flight through conditions that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. I was hoping you might be interested, she said finally. Jackson looked up, surprised. Me? Not Rodriguez or one of the other younger pilots. This isn't about age or flight hours, Maya replied. It's about adaptability and judgment. Yesterday, when I suggested the split extraction through Dragon's throat, you didn't hesitate or question the unconventional approach. You assessed the tactical situation and made a decision based on the facts, not on doctrine or tradition. That's just good piloting, Jackson said with a shrug. Exactly, Maya agreed. And that's what this mission needs. 2 good pilots who can think beyond the textbook. Jackson studied the route again, mentally flying it in his head. These sections here, he said, pointing to several particularly narrow passages, we'd need to fly these in single file. No room for wingtip to wingtip formation. I've accounted for that in the planning, Maya assured him. Lead aircraft takes point through the narrowest sections. Second aircraft follows at 5-second intervals. We maintain visual contact where possible, instrument separation where necessary. And if we encounter unexpected resistance, we adapt, Maya said simply. The mission parameters prioritize reaching the target area undetected. Everything else is secondary. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, considering the risks and challenges of what Maya was proposing. Finally, he looked up with a grin that took years off his face. Count me in, Ghost. This is exactly the kind of flying I joined the Navy to do. The mission briefing at 1400 hours was unlike any Maya had experienced before. Instead of taking a seat in the back of the room, she found herself standing at the front alongside Commander Chun, presenting the operation she had designed to the assembled pilots and mission planners. Operation Ghostwalker will proceed in 2 phases, Maya began, her voice steady as she outlined the mission parameters. Phase 1. A 2-aircraft Pathfinder element will navigate the Western Canyon approach to eliminate observation posts and secure the route for the main strike force. Phase 2. An 8-aircraft strike package will follow the secured route to deliver precision ordnance against the enemy command center. She detailed the specifics of the canyon navigation, the communication protocols for operating in radar shadows, and the contingency plans for various scenarios. Throughout her presentation, she could feel Captain Donovan watching her from the back of the room, his expression inscrutable. Questions? Maya concluded after laying out the complete operation. A senior pilot from another squadron raised his hand. The western approach requires flying below radar coverage for nearly 40 minutes, through terrain that barely accommodates our aircraft. What happens if you encounter an obstacle that doesn't appear on our maps? The Pathfinder element will be equipped with advanced terrain mapping, systems to identify any discrepancies between our intelligence and the actual conditions, Maya replied. If we encounter impassable terrain, we have 3 alternate routes mapped through the canyon system, though each presents its own challenges. And if all alternate routes are compromised? The pilot pressed. Then we abort the Pathfinder mission and revert to conventional approach vectors for the main strike, accepting the increased risk of detection, Maya answered without hesitation. She had considered every contingency, every failure mode, every worst-case scenario. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, covering everything from weapons loadouts to extraction protocols. Maya answered each one with precision and confidence, demonstrating a mastery of tactical planning that surprised even those who had witnessed her flying skills the previous day. When the briefing concluded, Captain Donovan approached as the room cleared. "Impressive presentation, Lieutenant. You've thought this through thoroughly." "Thank you, sir," Maya replied. "I believe this approach gives us the best chance of success with acceptable risk parameters." Donovan nodded slowly. "I agree. Which is why I'm approving Operation Ghost Walker to proceed as planned." He paused, studying her for a moment. "You know, when Commander Chun first recommended you for the Carrier Air Wing, I had my doubts. Your record was impressive, but paper qualifications don't always translate to real-world performance." Maya remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I was wrong," Donovan said simply. "In 27 years of naval service, I've learned that the most valuable quality in an officer isn't technical skill or academic knowledge, it's judgment. The ability to make the right decision under pressure, when lives are at stake and there's no textbook answer to follow." He gestured to the tactical display where Maya's mission plan was still visible. "This operation demonstrates that quality. It's unconventional, high risk, and exactly what the situation demands. The mark of exceptional judgment." "Thank you, sir," Maya said again, unsure how else to respond to this unexpected praise. Donovan turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Lieutenant. After this operation concludes, I'll be recommending you for accelerated promotion to Lieutenant Commander. The Navy needs more officers with your combination of skills and judgment in leadership positions." Maya watched him leave, processing his words. From dismissing her as a quota-filler to recommending her for accelerated promotion in the space of 24 hours, it was a transformation she hadn't anticipated. Commander Chun approached as the captain departed. "He means it, you know," she said quietly. "Donovan doesn't give praise lightly, and he never makes recommendations he doesn't believe in." "It's a lot to process," Maya admitted. "That's leadership," Chun replied with a small smile. "One day you're fighting for recognition, the next you're planning operations that could change the course of a conflict. The transition happens faster than most people realize." Maya looked back at the mission plan displayed on the screen. "Do you think it will work?" "I think it's the best plan we have," Chun answered honestly. "And I think if anyone can pull off this Pathfinder mission, it's you and Jackson." She checked her watch. "Speaking of which, you should get some rest. Mission launch is scheduled for 0500 tomorrow." Maya nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she still was from the previous day's combat. "I'll be ready." As she walked back to her quarters, Maya found herself thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. From the little girl watching fighter jets at an air show, to the academy cadet proving herself against skeptical instructors, to the combat pilot navigating impossible canyons with enemy fighters on her tail, each step had required her to believe in herself when others didn't. Tomorrow's mission would be the most challenging yet, not just in terms of flying skill but in terms of leadership. For the first time, other pilots would be following her plan, trusting her judgment, risking their lives based on her tactical assessment. Maya reached her quarters and sat on her bunk, removing her boots. Rodriguez was on duty again, giving Maya the privacy to reflect on everything that had transpired. The new call sign, the Distinguished Flying Cross recommendation, the accelerated promotion, these were external validations of what she had always known about herself. But tomorrow wasn't about medals or promotions or validation. Tomorrow was about completing a mission that could save countless lives by preventing an enemy offensive before it began. Tomorrow was about proving that sometimes the most impossible path was the only viable option. Maya closed her eyes, beginning the mental preparation that had become her pre-mission ritual. She visualized the canyon system, imagining each turn, each narrow passage, each potential threat. She rehearsed her responses to various emergencies, preparing her mind for the split-second decisions that might be necessary. In the darkness behind her eyelids, Maya saw not just the mission ahead but the journey behind. She saw her parents' disappointed faces when she announced her military plans, the academy instructors who had expected her to fail, the fellow pilots who had viewed her with skepticism, and Captain Donovan, who had dismissed her without even giving her a chance to prove herself. But she also saw Commander Chun, who had recognized her potential and advocated for her. She saw Jackson, who had acknowledged her superior skills without ego or resentment. She saw Rodriguez and the other young pilots who looked to her as proof that excellence was the only measure that truly mattered. Tomorrow, Maya Ghost Winters would lead a mission that defied conventional tactical wisdom, navigating canyons deemed too dangerous for combat operations to strike a target considered unreachable by traditional methods. Tomorrow, she would demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful response to doubt and dismissal wasn't words but action, silent, decisive action that left no room for argument or denial. And if she succeeded, perhaps the next woman to sit in a fighter cockpit wouldn't have to prove herself quite so dramatically. Perhaps the next Captain Donovan would think twice before dismissing a pilot based on anything other than their demonstrated abilities. That, Maya decided as she drifted toward sleep, would be a victory worth risking everything for. The pre-dawn darkness enveloped the flight deck in shadows broken only by the red and green running lights that guided the deck crew through their preparations. Maya stood beside her FSA-18, conducting her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. Despite the early hour, the deck buzzed with activity as maintenance crews made final adjustments to both her aircraft and Jackson's, which sat nearby. "Perfect flying conditions," Jackson commented as he approached, flight helmet tucked under his arm. "Clear skies, minimal wind. Almost makes you forget we're about to fly through canyons most pilots wouldn't attempt in a training exercise." Maya nodded, completing her external inspection. The weather forecast for the target area shows similarly favorable conditions. We should have excellent visibility throughout the approach. "How are you feeling?" Jackson asked, his voice dropping so only she could hear. Maya paused, considering the question. The night had brought fitful sleep, her mind continuously rehearsing the mission, anticipating challenges, visualizing success. "Focused," she answered finally. "You?" Jackson grinned. "Terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Exactly how you're supposed to feel before making history." Commander Chun approached before Maya could respond. "Final mission briefing in 10 minutes. Captain Donovan wants to review contingency protocols once more before launch." "Yes, ma'am," they acknowledged in unison. The briefing was concise, focused primarily on extraction scenarios and communication protocols for the canyon approach, where standard radio contact would be intermittent at best. "Once you enter the Western Canyon system, we expect to lose consistent communication until you reach these designated clearings," the communications officer explained, indicating several wider areas in the canyon network. "Your aircraft will automatically transmit compressed data packets at these points, providing mission status without requiring verbal confirmation." Captain Donovan addressed the final point. "Copy that, home plate," Maya responded. Ghost Inspector proceeding with launch. Jackson's new call sign, Spectre, had been assigned just hours earlier, completing the supernatural theme of their mission designation. The catapult launch hurled Maya's FA-18 from the carrier deck into the pre-dawn sky, the G-forces pressing her back into her seat as the aircraft accelerated from 0 to 165 knots in 2 seconds. Jackson's launch followed moments later, his aircraft appearing on Maya's wing as they climbed to their initial cruising altitude. "Spectre, form up on my wing," Maya directed once they cleared the carrier's airspace. "We'll maintain standard formation until we reach the coastal approach point." "Copy that, Ghost," Jackson acknowledged, easing his aircraft into position. They flew in silence for the next 20 minutes, each focused on the mission ahead. The transition from darkness to dawn occurred gradually around them, the black sky slowly warming to deep indigo, then to the rich blues and purples of early morning. "Beautiful view," Jackson commented as they approached the coastline, the rugged mountains ahead silhouetted against the rising sun. "Enjoy it while you can," Maya replied. "Once we enter the canyon system, we'll be too busy avoiding rock walls to appreciate the scenery." They reached the designated coastal ingress point, precisely on schedule, beginning their descent to the terrain following altitude that would keep them below enemy radar coverage. "Home plate, this is Ghost," Maya reported. "Approaching Phase 1 entry point. Commencing communications restriction protocols." "Copy, Ghost. Good hunting. We'll be listening for your data packets at the designated transmission points." Maya took a deep breath, centering herself for what came next. "Spectre, dropping to canyon insertion altitude. Follow my lead, maintain visual separation in narrow passages." "Right behind you, Ghost." Maya pushed her aircraft into a shallow dive, descending rapidly until the terrain following radar began registering the approaching canyon walls. At 500 feet above the canyon floor, she leveled off, her aircraft now effectively invisible to conventional radar systems. The western approach unfolded before them like a natural labyrinth, towering rock walls rising thousands of feet on either side, the canyon floor twisting and turning through the mountain range in a series of interconnected passages that seemed designed to confuse and disorient. Maya felt a familiar clarity settling over her mind as she guided her aircraft through the first major turn, the canyon narrowing around her. This was the state she cherished most, complete immersion in the present moment. Every sense heightened, her body and the aircraft moving as one integrated system. The first 15 minutes of canyon flying proceeded without incident, each turn revealing new challenges that Maya navigated with precision born of intensive preparation and natural skill. Jackson maintained his position behind her, matching her maneuvers with equal precision. They reached the first designated communication point, a wider section of canyon that allowed for brief data transmission back to the carrier. Maya activated her compressed data packet, sending their position, status, and initial reconnaissance findings. "Packet transmitted," she confirmed to Jackson. "Proceeding to first observation post location." According to their intelligence, the enemy had positioned 4 observation posts along the western approach, small outposts, staffed with observers equipped with communications equipment to alert the main base of any approaching aircraft. The first post was situated on a rocky outcropping overlooking a particularly treacherous section of the canyon network. "Visual on observation post Alpha," Maya reported as the structure came into view. "Single building, communications array visible. No signs of external activity." "Confirmed," Jackson acknowledged. "Approach vector looks clear." Maya adjusted her heading slightly, lining up for a precision strike that would neutralize the observation post without requiring a second pass. "Weapons hot." "Fox 2. Her aircraft shuddered slightly as the air-to-ground missile detached from its hardpoint, streaking toward the target with deadly accuracy. The observation post disappeared in a brief flash of light and debris, the explosion contained by the surrounding terrain. "Direct hit," Jackson confirmed. "No secondary explosions or communications detected." "We're still dark, is it?" Rodriguez challenged. "Before today, no one would have attempted that western approach. Now it's going to be studied at the Academy as an example of innovative tactical thinking." Maya considered this as she changed into her dress uniform. Perhaps Rodriguez was right. Perhaps today's mission would change more than just the outcome of one conflict in one region. Perhaps it would change how future pilots thought about seemingly impossible challenges. At precisely 1800 hours, Maya presented herself on the carrier's bridge. The space was more crowded than usual, with senior officers and representatives from various departments gathered in a semi-formal arrangement. Captain Donovan stood at the center, his own dress uniform adorned with the ribbons and medals of his long career. "Lieutenant Winters," he began as she approached and saluted. "At ease." The bridge fell silent as Donovan addressed the assembled officers. Today, the USS Lincoln Battle Group executed an operation that intelligence analysts are already describing as a turning point in this conflict. The enemy command center we neutralized was preparing to launch a coordinated offensive that would have put thousands of our personnel at risk. He paused, his gaze moving across the gathered officers before returning to Maya. The success of this operation hinged on Lieutenant Winters' unconventional, tactical approach, a Pathfinder mission through terrain that conventional wisdom deemed unsuitable for combat operations. Donovan gestured for Maya to step forward. "Lieutenant Winters exemplifies the qualities that define naval aviation excellence: technical mastery, tactical innovation, and the moral courage to challenge established thinking when the situation demands it." From a small case, he withdrew something that caught the light: a pair of gold oak leaf insignia. "It is therefore my privilege to inform you that Fleet Command has approved your battlefield promotion to the rank of Lieutenant Commander, effective immediately." Maya stood perfectly still, processing his words as Donovan removed her lieutenant's bars and replaced them with the oak leaves of a lieutenant commander, a promotion that typically took years to achieve. "Additionally," Donovan continued, "I have nominated you for the Distinguished Flying Cross for your actions, both today and during yesterday's engagement with enemy fighters." The citation notes, and I quote, "Extraordinary aerial achievement while participating in combat operations, demonstrating exceptional piloting skill and tactical judgment under extreme conditions." The bridge erupted in applause, led by Commander Chun and echoed by the assembled officers. Maya maintained her composure, though she felt a complex mix of pride, vindication, and a certain disbelief at how rapidly her circumstances had changed. "Thank you, sir," she said when the applause subsided. "It's an honor to serve with this carrier group." "The honor has been ours," Donovan replied, and Maya was struck by the sincerity in his voice, a marked contrast to his dismissive tone just days earlier. Sometimes it takes extraordinary circumstances to reveal extraordinary capabilities. "You've not only proven yourself as a pilot, Lieutenant Commander Winters. You've changed how we'll approach similar tactical challenges in the future." As the formal ceremony concluded and the gathering transitioned to a more casual reception, Maya found herself at the bridge windows, looking out at the darkening sky. Jackson joined her, now wearing his own dress uniform. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, offering a respectful nod. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Maya replied, "though it feels somewhat surreal." Jackson leaned against the window frame. 2 days ago, you were fighting for the chance to fly routine missions. Today, you're wearing oak leaves and being cited for the Distinguished Flying Cross. That's more than surreal. That's the stuff of naval aviation legend." Maya smiled slightly. "I didn't set out to become a legend. I just wanted the chance to do the job I was trained for. And in doing so, you've changed the standard for what that job entails," Jackson observed. "The captain mentioned the Winters Doctrine during the intelligence debrief after you left. So it's actually a thing?" Maya asked, surprised that the concept Rodriguez had mentioned had already reached official channels. "Apparently so. The basic principle is reframing seemingly prohibitive terrain features as tactical advantages, using the very obstacles others avoid as your path to success." Maya considered this, finding a certain poetry in the concept. It applied not just to canyon flying but to her entire career trajectory, turning the obstacles and skepticism she'd faced into motivation to excel beyond anyone's expectations. Commander Chun approached, joining their conversation. "I see Jackson's told you about your namesake doctrine," she said with a smile. "Fleet Command is already discussing incorporating it into the tactical curriculum at the Academy." "It seems excessive," Maya admitted. We simply found a path that others hadn't considered. Somewhere beyond that horizon was home, where her parents still struggled to understand her chosen path. She wondered what they would think of today's events. Would her academic father see the intellectual challenge in navigating impossible terrain? Would her activist mother recognize the courage required to challenge established thinking? What happens next? She asked, turning back to Chun. In the short term, you'll lead your own flight group, as the captain mentioned, Chun replied. Beyond that, your career path just expanded significantly. Battlefield promotions and distinguished flying crosses tend to accelerate one's trajectory. Maya nodded, processing this new reality. And the enemy forces? Intelligence reports indicate they're in disarray following the destruction of their command center, Chun answered. The offensive they were planning has been effectively neutralized. Regional Command is already calling Operation Ghostwalker a decisive turning point. What exactly will I be teaching them? Maya asked. Officially, advanced tactical decision-making and terrain navigation, Vasquez replied. Unofficially, something far more valuable, that barriers exist primarily in the mind, that conventional wisdom should be questioned when circumstances demand it, and that excellence is the only standard that matters in naval aviation, regardless of gender or background. Maya nodded, understanding the deeper purpose of her assignment. When do I start? Tomorrow morning, 0800 Tactical Simulation Center. Your first class is already oversubscribed. We had to limit attendance to aviation track cadets only, much to the disappointment of several other departments. The following morning, Maya arrived at the simulation center 15 minutes early, wanting to familiarize herself with the equipment before the cadets arrived. She found the room already half full, cadets having arrived well ahead of schedule to secure seats for her inaugural lecture. Maya recognized the eagerness in their faces, the same hunger for knowledge and experience she had felt during her own training. But she also noted something she hadn't seen in her own cadet days: young women sitting confidently among their male counterparts, not isolated or separated as token representatives of their gender, but integrated as equals in the pursuit of aviation excellence. As the clock struck 0800, Maya moved to the front of the room, her distinguished flying cross visible on her uniform, the oak leaves of her rank catching the light. The room fell silent, all eyes focused on the officer whose exploits had already become legendary within naval aviation circles. "Good morning, cadets," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Maya Winters. Some call me Ghost, a call sign I earned during a mission that many considered impossible before we executed it." She activated the tactical display, showing a terrain map of the canyon network from Operation Ghostwalker. Classified details removed, but the essential challenge still evident. Naval aviation exists at the intersection of technical mastery, tactical innovation, and moral courage, she continued. The aircraft you'll fly represent the pinnacle of engineering achievement, but they're ultimately tools. How you employ those tools, when you follow established doctrine and when you create new approaches, will define your effectiveness as naval aviators. Maya moved around the display, indicating the canyon system that had seemed impossible to navigate until she had proven otherwise. 3 months ago, conventional tactical assessment deemed this approach unsuitable for combat operations. The terrain was too challenging, the margins for error too small, the risks too high compared to established routes. She paused, meeting the eyes of several cadets in the front row. But sometimes, the path that seems most dangerous is actually the safest, because it's the one your adversary never expects you to take. Sometimes, the limitations others accept as absolute are merely suggestions waiting to be challenged by someone with the skill and courage to see beyond them. A young female cadet in the second row raised her hand. "Ma'am, is it true that you flew through a canyon passage barely wider than your aircraft's wingspan?" Maya smiled slightly. The passage was approximately 25% wider than my wingspan, which still left very little margin for error. But the point isn't how narrow the passage was. It's that everyone else assumed it couldn't be done, which made it the perfect approach vector. Another cadet raised his hand. "Commander, how did you know you could navigate that terrain successfully when no one had done it before?" "I didn't know with absolute certainty," Maya admitted. "What I knew was that the conventional approaches guaranteed detection by enemy forces, while the canyon approach offered the element of surprise if executed correctly. I assessed my skills, the aircraft's capabilities, and the mission parameters, then made a calculated decision that the potential tactical advantage outweighed the technical risk." For the next 2 hours, Maya guided the cadets through the tactical principles that had informed Operation Ghost Walker, challenging them to identify similar opportunities in various scenarios where conventional approaches might be suboptimal. Their responses impressed her. These young officers in training demonstrated an openness to unconventional thinking that suggested naval aviation's future was in capable hands. As the session concluded, Captain Vasquez appeared at the back of the room, observing the cadets' enthusiastic participation. She approached as the last students filed out, many lingering to ask additional questions or simply express their admiration. "You've made quite an impression," Vasquez noted. "I haven't seen cadets this engaged in tactical theory since, well, possibly ever." Maya smiled. "They're sharp, asking excellent questions, challenging assumptions. It's encouraging. It's what happens when they see concrete proof that excellence transcends old limitations," Vasquez replied. "Your presence here, wearing that distinguished flying cross and those oak leaves, says more than any lecture could." As they walked across the academy grounds toward the officers' dining facility, Vasquez continued. "You know, when you were a cadet, several instructors questioned whether women belonged in combat aviation roles. They cited physical limitations, emotional factors, all the usual arguments." Maya remembered those arguments all too well. "And now?" "And now we have the Winters Doctrine being taught in tactical classes, and a female lieutenant commander who earned the Distinguished Flying Cross by flying through terrain others deemed impossible." Vasquez smiled. "It's harder to maintain biased assumptions in the face of irrefutable evidence." Later that evening, Maya stood on the seawall overlooking the Severn River, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. Her thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the little girl watching fighter jets with wonder, to the cadet fighting for recognition, to the combat pilot who had changed tactical doctrine through actions rather than arguments. She thought about the young cadets she had instructed that day, especially the women who saw in her accomplishments a validation of their own aspirations. They wouldn't face exactly the same barriers she had. Her generation had broken down some of those walls, but they would encounter their own challenges, their own impossible canyons to navigate. What mattered wasn't that the path would be easy, but that they would have the courage to find their own way through, to question limitations others accepted as absolute, to prove through performance what no amount of argument could establish. The Distinguished Flying Cross rested against her chest, a tangible reminder of what happened when preparation met opportunity, when skill confronted skepticism, when action spoke louder than doubts. It represented not just her individual achievement, but a shift in what was possible for all who followed, a silent response that left no room for argument. As the last light faded from the sky, Maya turned back toward the academy buildings, their windows glowing with promise in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow she would continue showing these future aviators how to see beyond conventional limitations, how to find paths where others saw only obstacles, how to respond to doubt, not with words, but with excellence that spoke for itself. And perhaps, years from now, some of them would develop doctrines of their own, finding new paths through challenges that hadn't yet emerged, pushing the boundaries of what naval aviation could accomplish even further than she had. That would be her true legacy, not just the tactical approach that bore her name, but the mindset she helped instill in those who would follow. That night, before sleep claimed her, Maya sent a message to her parents, a simple thank you for their support, accompanied by a quote from Amelia Earhart that had guided her own journey. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. In that tenacity, the unwavering commitment to excellence despite doubts and dismissals, lay the true story of the Ghost, the silent response that had changed not just one mission or one career, but the very doctrine of what was possible in naval aviation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.